The Galactic Postal Service had exactly one job, one simple job: deliver messages across the cosmos with the precision of a Swiss chronometer and the reliability of Tuesday following Monday. For 47,000 years, they had maintained a perfect record of interdimensional mail delivery, a feat so impressive that it was carved into 17 different monuments across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Then came Tuesday, October 15th, 2024, and Kleptonian administrative assistant Blix Flindermort had a spectacular case of cosmic dyslexia. The message was supposed to go to Kepler 442b, home of the Verdanian Botanical Collective, a peaceful civilization of sentient moss creatures who spent their days perfecting the art of growing 3-dimensional daisies and writing poetry about photosynthesis. The Kleptonian Science Council had crafted a beautiful diplomatic inquiry about advanced composting techniques and whether anyone had figured out how to make fertilizer that didn't smell like rotting Gorblax fish. But Blix, suffering from what his species charmingly called neural coordinate dysfunctionality syndrome, looked at the delivery coordinates through his 6 eyes, blinked twice, and made the kind of mistake that would later be studied in Galactic Administration 101 courses under the chapter titled How One Clerk Can Accidentally Start an Interdimensional Incident. He sent it to Sol 3, Earth, the third rock from a medium-sized star where bipedal mammals had recently discovered fire, the wheel, and the inexplicable joy of arguing about politics on something called the Internet. The message itself was a thing of bureaucratic beauty. Greetings, fellow cultivators of peace and verdant life. The Kleptonian Science Council humbly requests your wisdom regarding optimal soil pH for interdimensional vegetation. We have heard tales of your legendary agricultural prowess and would be honored to exchange knowledge about sustainable growing practices. Please respond with your most cherished gardening secrets as we seek to improve our cosmic compost initiatives. May your roots grow deep and your leaves reach toward infinite light. What they got back made 3 Kleptonian scientists faint, 1 develop a nervous twitch, and their head botanist quit on the spot to become a professional meditation instructor on a monastery planet. The human response arrived exactly 72 hours later, transmitted through every available Earth satellite with the enthusiasm of a species that had just discovered they weren't alone in the universe and were absolutely thrilled to share their culture with new friends. "Holy shit, aliens!" was the opening line of humanity's first official interstellar diplomatic correspondence. The message continued with the breathless excitement of a caffeinated teenager. "This is amazing! We're not alone. Okay, composting right. Dude, you came to the right planet. We've got composting down to a science. But first, check this out." Followed by approximately 47 gigabytes of data containing detailed schematics for military-grade combat vehicles, a complete recipe collection for something called Carolina Reaper Hot Wings, 17 different versions of humanities, national anthems played on instruments that shouldn't exist, and a bewildering array of moving pictures featuring small furry creatures doing inexplicably hilarious things. There was also a section labeled Gardening Tips, which instead of peaceful botanical advice, contained instructions for growing ghost peppers hot enough to melt metal, carnivorous plants that could allegedly eat small vehicles, and a technique called companion planting that somehow involved strategic placement of what appeared to be explosive devices to keep the deer away. Supreme Agricultural Coordinator Yibbleton, the Serene, sat in his meditation bubble, staring at the human transmission with all 4 of his eye stalks crossed in confusion. The translation algorithms had worked perfectly, too perfectly. Every word was crystal clear, which made the content all the more terrifying. "They grow food that burns," he whispered to his assistant, Grimbold, the perpetually concerned. "They actually cultivate pain and call it flavor." Grimbold's tentacles were turning the color of deep anxiety, a lovely shade of purple-green that usually indicated either severe indigestion or impending nervous breakdown. "Sir, there's more. They've included something called entertainment media." The entertainment section was perhaps the most disturbing part of the entire transmission. It contained what humans called action movies, apparently documentary footage of their daily lives, showing these creatures regularly throwing themselves off cliffs, exploding things for recreational purposes, and engaging in something called extreme sports, which seemed to involve deliberately putting themselves in mortal danger for absolutely no reason other than what they termed fun. There was also a subcategory labeled horror films, which, according to the human explanation, were movies designed to scare the shit out of you, because sometimes you want to be terrified. This concept was so alien to Kleptonian psychology that their translation computers assumed it was a glitch and ran 17 diagnostic checks before accepting that yes, these creatures actually enjoyed being frightened. But the piece de resistance was the human music collection. The Kleptonians had sent gentle recordings of cosmic whale songs and meditative frequencies designed to promote inner peace and spiritual growth. The humans responded with something called death metal, followed by dubstep, followed by what they claimed was classical music, but sounded suspiciously like organized chaos involving far too many instruments making far too much noise all at the same time. Yibbleton pressed his primary thinking appendage against his cranium in what humans might recognize as the universal gesture of, "I have a massive headache." "Grimbold, please tell me there's some explanation for this madness." "Well, sir," Grimbold consulted his analysis tablet with the expression of someone reading their own obituary. "According to our xenopsychology department, humans appear to be the only species in recorded galactic history that actively seeks discomfort, considers danger entertaining, and has somehow managed to survive as a civilization despite spending most of their time trying to kill themselves in creative ways." The report continued with increasingly disturbing revelations. Humans had invented over 3,000 different ways to cook food, including several methods that involved setting it on fire intentionally. They had created recreational activities that included jumping out of perfectly functional aircraft, swimming with predatory marine life, and something called bungee jumping, which was essentially throwing themselves off high places while attached to a rope, apparently for the sheer joy of nearly dying. Most confusing of all, they seemed to do all of this while simultaneously creating art, music, literature, and scientific advances that were actually quite impressive when viewed from a safe distance of several thousand light years. "Sir," Grimbold said, his voice carrying the weight of someone about to deliver very bad news, "there's something else. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected unusual activity in the Sol system." "Define unusual," Grimbold. "They appear to be launching things, lots of things, into space very quickly. On Earth, the discovery of alien contact had gone through the predictable human stages of denial, panic, excitement, bureaucratic committee formation, argument about who should respond, more panic, and finally settling on the most human solution possible: send everything and let the aliens sort it out. NASA, ESA, SpaceX, and approximately 47 other space agencies had somehow coordinated the fastest international cooperation in human history, launching a communication array that would have impressed even the most advanced galactic civilizations, if those civilizations had been prepared for the absolute chaos of human enthusiasm. The second wave of human transmissions began arriving while Yibbleton was still recovering from the first batch. This time, they had organized their response into helpful categories: Culture Exchange Package, Part 2, The Good Stuff. The humans had apparently decided that their first transmission was merely an appetizer and had now prepared what they called the full course meal of human civilization. This included complete archives of human history, which was essentially 40,000 years of humans figuring out increasingly creative ways to disagree with each other, while simultaneously building impressive monuments and inventing ice cream. The historical section alone was enough to send 3 Kleptonian historians into early retirement. Humans had fought wars over spices. They had built massive stone structures to store dead people. They had invented money, then spent most of their time arguing about who had how much of it. They had created religions, philosophies, and political systems, then spent the rest of their time arguing about those too. But somehow, in between all this arguing, they had also created extraordinary things. Music that could make you weep with joy, art that captured the essence of existence in pigment and stone, stories that explored the deepest meanings of consciousness and purpose. And food, oh, the food. Even the Kleponians, who sustained themselves primarily on light absorption and mineral supplements, had to admit that human cuisine was impressively diverse. "They have over 300 types of cheese, sir," reported Grimbold, scrolling through the culinary data with something approaching awe. 300. We have light, just light. The scientific exchange was equally bewildering. Humans had provided complete technical specifications for everything from basic agriculture to space travel to something called the Internet, which appeared to be a global neural network that humans use primarily to share pictures of small animals and argue about everything imaginable. Their agricultural techniques were creative. Where Kleponians had spent millennia perfecting the art of gentle coaxing of plants through meditation and harmonic resonance, humans had apparently decided that the best approach was to force plants to grow bigger, faster, and more productively through a combination of chemistry, genetic manipulation, and what they cheerfully called aggressive optimization. Yet somehow, it worked. Their crop yields were extraordinary. Their food was remarkably diverse, and they had managed to feed a population of over 8 billion individuals on a single planet, which was impossible according to every galactic agricultural model ever created. Yibbleton was developing what humans might recognize as an ulcer. "Grimbold, I need you to contact Agent Wizzlebonk from the Covert Observation Division. We need someone to visit this planet and figure out what we're dealing with before we respond. Sir, with respect, Agent Wizzlebonk is currently recovering from his last assignment, something about a species that kept trying to feed him fermented beverages and insisting he participate in group singing rituals." "Fine. Send Throgmorton 9. He's competent." Throgmorton 9 had a nervous breakdown after visiting the crystalline entities of Vega 7. He's now working as a massage therapist on Paradise Station. "Then who do we have?" Grimbold consulted his roster with the expression of someone about to suggest they all move to another galaxy. "Well, sir, there's Bumblethorpe the Adequate." Bumblethorpe the Adequate was exactly as his name suggested, adequate. Not brilliant, not incompetent, just magnificently, consistently adequate at everything he attempted. He had earned his position in the Covert Observation Division through sheer persistence and the kind of steady reliability that made him perfect for routine surveillance of peaceful herbivore civilizations. He was not prepared for Earth. The briefing should have been a warning. When your mission parameters include phrases like "investigate species of apparently suicidal bipeds who consider danger recreational," "determine why they voluntarily consume beverages that impair their cognitive functions," and "find out what extreme sports means and why anyone would do them," perhaps it's time to consider a career change. But Bumblethorpe the Adequate was nothing if not adequate, so he dutifully climbed into his Class 7 observation vessel, disguised as a metallic weather balloon because apparently humans saw those everywhere and ignored them, programmed the coordinates for Sol 3, and set off to solve the mystery of why the universe's most inexplicable species was also one of its most successful. The journey to Earth took exactly 17 standard days, during which Bumblethorpe reviewed every piece of intelligence the Kleptonian Science Council had managed to gather about humans. It was extensive and deeply troubling. Humans appeared to be the only species that had invented the concept of fiction, stories that everyone knew were not true but enjoyed anyway. They had created thousands of different languages, then spent most of their time trying to translate between them. They had divided their single planet into arbitrary regions called countries, then developed fierce loyalty to these imaginary boundaries. Most puzzling of all, they had somehow developed space travel, global communication, and advanced medical technology while simultaneously maintaining the firm belief that the best way to resolve disagreements was to argue loudly until someone gave up. Bumblethorpe's first glimpse of Earth from orbit was chaotic. The planet was lit up like a Kleptonian festival celebration, with lights everywhere indicating massive energy consumption. There were thousands of artificial satellites orbiting the planet, many of which appeared to be broadcasting continuous streams of human communication to other humans on the same planet, which seemed wildly inefficient. Most disturbing of all, as Bumblethorpe watched, humans were deliberately launching themselves off the planet in small vehicles, apparently for recreational purposes. Some of these vehicles returned, some did not. The humans did this anyway. What kind of species, Bumblethorpe muttered to himself, considers leaving their own planet a form of entertainment? His observation mission began in what humans called Florida, primarily because the local weather patterns would provide good cover for his vessel, and secondarily because his intelligence briefing had identified it as a place where weird stuff happens regularly, so one more weird thing won't be noticed. This turned out to be absolutely accurate. Within his first hour of observation, Bumblethorpe witnessed humans deliberately wrestling with large reptilian predators, launching themselves through the air while attached to giant pieces of fabric, and engaging in an activity called beach volleyball, which seemed to involve hitting a sphere back and forth over a net while standing on ground that was too hot for most species to walk on. "They're doing it on purpose," he recorded in his mission log. All of it. The dangerous animals, the impossible heat, the flying through the air. It's all intentional. His covert observation protocols required him to assume human form and blend in with the local population. The Kleptonian Science Council had provided him with a sophisticated holographic disguise based on their analysis of human transmissions. He would appear as a standard human male, approximately average in all measurable characteristics, with what their xenobiologists had calculated to be the most common human appearance. What they had not accounted for was that average human appearance on a beach in Florida included several characteristics that were considered extremely unusual by galactic standards. Humans, it turned out, deliberately exposed their skin to radiation from their local star for the purpose of changing its color. They called this tanning and considered it attractive. Bumblethorpe materialized on the beach, looking like the most perfectly average human possible, which immediately made him completely conspicuous, because he was the only person present who wasn't either bright red from sun exposure, covered in colorful chemical substances, or wearing decorative cloth coverings that seemed designed to cover as little surface area as possible. His first attempt at human interaction did not go well. "Greetings, fellow human," Bumblethorpe said to a nearby sunbather, using the standard galactic diplomatic greeting translated into English. "I wish to observe your cultural practices and understand why you deliberately expose yourself to stellar radiation." The sunbather, a woman named Jessica who was trying to enjoy a peaceful vacation, looked up from her book with the expression humans reserve for people who are either extremely drunk or possibly dangerous. What? Your voluntary radiation exposure ritual?" Bumblethorpe continued enthusiastically. "It appears designed to damage your epidermis. Is this a religious ceremony? A form of punishment? I must understand the cultural significance. Jessica sat up, reaching for her phone with the careful movements of someone preparing to call either security or mental health services. Dude, are you okay? Do you need help? This was Bumblethorpe's first introduction to the concept of human concern for strangers, which was not mentioned anywhere in his briefing materials. According to galactic standard, most species would either ignore unusual behavior or report it to appropriate authorities. Humans apparently actually worried about each other, even people they had never met. Bumblethorpe paused, realizing his approach needed adjustment. I am a researcher, yes, studying beach culture for a university, a human university. Oh, Jessica's expression shifted immediately from concern to interest. Like anthropology. That's cool. What do you want to know? And just like that, Bumblethorpe discovered the most dangerous aspect of human nature, their enthusiasm for sharing information. Ask a human about something they're interested in, and they will tell you everything they know, along with several things they're not sure about, and probably some things that aren't true but make good stories. Over the next 2 hours, Jessica provided Bumblethorpe with a comprehensive education in human beach culture, Florida tourism, American geography, the difference between sunscreen and sunblock, the best places to get seafood, her personal dating history, her opinions on current politics, and the complete plot of a television series she was watching about humans who lived on a mysterious island. By the time she was finished, Bumblethorpe had filled 17 pages of notes and was beginning to understand why human communication required so much bandwidth. They didn't just exchange information, they exchanged everything, all at once, whether it was relevant or not. You should definitely try jet skiing while you're here, Jessica concluded. It's amazing. You get on this little vehicle and go super fast across the water, and sometimes you fall off, and it's terrifying, but in a good way. You deliberately fall off the vehicle? Bumblethorpe asked, his understanding of human logic reaching new levels of confusion. Well, not on purpose, but when it happens, it's kind of fun, like a surprise adventure. Bumblethorpe made a note. Humans find unexpected failure entertaining. Possible masochistic tendencies? Investigate further. D. His next observation post was what humans called a theme park, which his research had identified as locations where humans paid money to be deliberately frightened, spun around at dangerous speeds, and launched through the air in mechanical contraptions that seemed specifically designed to simulate mortal peril. The experience was enlightening. Bumblethorpe watched in fascination as humans voluntarily strapped themselves into devices that would be considered torture equipment on most civilized planets. They called these contraptions roller coasters and waited in long lines for the privilege of experiencing artificial terror. "Way!" screamed a small human child as their vehicle plummeted toward the ground at speeds that should have triggered every survival instinct evolution had ever developed. "Do it again!" The child was laughing, not crying in fear, not pleading for rescue, laughing with pure joy as they experienced what any rational species would recognize as a near-death experience. Bumblethorpe's mission log for that day was later considered a minor masterpiece of xenological observation. Subject species appears to have evolved completely backwards. Instead of avoiding danger, they actively seek it. Instead of valuing safety, they consider it boring. Instead of learning from negative experiences, they pay to repeat them. Recommend immediate psychological evaluation of entire species, assuming we can find a therapist brave enough to take the case. But the most disturbing discovery was yet to come. As Bumblethorpe observed human behavior patterns, he began to notice something that didn't match any of his briefing materials. Despite their apparent obsession with danger and chaos, humans also displayed remarkable levels of cooperation, creativity, and genuine care for each other. At the theme park, he watched parents carefully secure safety harnesses for their children, even while encouraging them to ride the most terrifying attractions. He observed teenagers helping elderly visitors navigate the crowds. He saw strangers sharing sunscreen, offering directions, and celebrating each other's courage in facing particularly intense rides. The humans were simultaneously reckless and caring, chaotic and organized, individuals and communities. They were a walking contradiction that somehow managed to function as a successful civilization. His observations continued for 3 weeks, during which Bumblethorpe witnessed humans engaging in activities that included deliberately jumping out of aircraft with fabric parachutes, racing vehicles at speeds that defied safety regulations, swimming with marine predators, climbing vertical rock faces for no practical reason, and eating food so spicy that their own bodies produced pain responses as a warning to stop eating it. But he also watched them create art of stunning beauty, music that conveyed emotions he didn't know existed, and scientific advances that impressed even Kleptonian researchers. They built hospitals to heal their injured, schools to educate their young, and systems of government that, while loud and argumentative, somehow managed to represent the interests of billions of individuals. Most remarkably, they did all of this while maintaining what they called humor, the ability to find joy and laughter in even the most challenging circumstances. Bumblethorpe's species had no equivalent for this concept. When things went wrong for Kleptonians, they meditated until the problem resolved itself or went away. When things went wrong for humans, they made jokes about it and kept working toward solutions. The revelation that changed everything came during Bumblethorpe's final week of observation. He was monitoring a human educational facility called a university when he encountered a group of students working on what they called a senior project. The project was titled Sustainable Agriculture in Post-Disaster Scenarios, and it was exactly the kind of advanced composting and growing techniques that the original Kleptonian message had been seeking. But these weren't trained agricultural specialists or government scientists. They were students, young humans barely old enough to be considered adults, and they were developing solutions to agricultural problems that had puzzled Kleptonian researchers for centuries. The key is redundancy, explained a human named David. Bumblethorpe had grown much better at casual conversation. You can't just have one perfect system, because perfect systems fail. You need multiple imperfect systems that can back each other up. This was revolutionary thinking by galactic standards. Most advanced civilizations focused on creating single, optimized solutions for each problem. The human approach of deliberately building in multiple backup systems seemed wasteful and inefficient, but it was also incredibly resilient. Plus, added another student named Maria, you have to design for people, not for ideal conditions. People are going to mess things up, forget steps, do things wrong, and try to improve the system whether you want them to or not. So you build that into the plan from the beginning. Bumblethorpe realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. A species that had designed its entire civilization around the assumption that mistakes were inevitable, and had turned that assumption into a strength rather than a weakness. Humans didn't succeed. Despite their chaotic, contradictory nature, they succeeded because of it. Their willingness to take risks meant they discovered things other species never tried. Their tendency to argue meant they examined problems from multiple perspectives. Their love of challenges meant they kept pushing beyond what seemed possible. And their habit of making mistakes meant they had developed the most sophisticated error recovery systems in the known galaxy. Bumblethorpe's final report to the Kleptonian Science Council was 17 pages long and contained observations that would revolutionize galactic understanding of civilization development. But the most important finding was also the simplest. Humans are not broken, he concluded. They are the most successfully adapted species we have ever encountered. They have solved the fundamental problem that limits every other civilization: how to thrive in an unpredictable universe. They do it by embracing unpredictability rather than avoiding it. When Yibbleton the Serene received Bumblethorpe's report, he experienced what humans would recognize as an intellectual epiphany, followed immediately by an existential crisis. "Grimbold," he said, calling his assistant into his meditation chamber, "I think we've been doing civilization wrong." "Oh, sir. For 40,000 years, we've built our entire society around avoiding problems, preventing conflicts, and maintaining perfect harmony. And what has it gotten us? We're peaceful, stable, and completely unprepared for anything unexpected." Yibbleton gestured toward the human transmissions, which had continued arriving throughout Bumblethorpe's mission and now filled an entire data archive. "These humans have spent their entire evolutionary history dealing with problems, conflicts, and chaos, and look what they've accomplished. They've turned adversity into innovation." The implications were staggering. If Bumblethorpe was right, then humanity represented a completely different approach to civilization, one that might be far more effective than the careful, controlled development that characterized most galactic societies. But there was still the matter of responding to their original message. The humans were clearly expecting some kind of reply, and their continued transmissions showed they were becoming increasingly creative in their attempts to establish communication. The latest human transmission had included something called memes, apparently a form of cultural communication that conveyed complex ideas through simple images combined with text. The Kleptonian translation computers had declared them incomprehensible and possibly dangerous to mental health. But Yibbleton was beginning to suspect that the problem wasn't with human communication, it was with Kleptonian expectations. "Grimbold, I want you to prepare a response to the human transmissions, but not a normal diplomatic response. I want you to try something experimental. Sir, I want you to respond the way they would respond, with enthusiasm, creativity, and complete disregard for proper protocols." The message that the Kleptonian Science Council transmitted to Earth 3 days later was unlike anything in galactic diplomatic history. Instead of the formal, carefully structured communications that characterized interstellar relations, it was spontaneous, enthusiastic, and just slightly chaotic. "Hello, amazing humans. Your transmissions have blown our collective minds. We are absolutely fascinated by your species and would like to propose something unprecedented, a complete cultural exchange program. We want to learn everything about your approach to civilization, and in return, we'll share everything we know about advanced technology, interstellar travel, and the really good meditation techniques. Also, we tried to make your memes and we think we're doing it wrong, but we're having fun trying. Please send more of your culture, your science, your art, your food recipes, and definitely more of those moving pictures of small animals doing amusing things." The universe just got way more interesting. The human response arrived 6 hours later and contained a single image, a cartoon drawing of a human face with an enormous smile and the text, "Best day ever." Attached was a data package containing the complete archives of human civilization, organized into helpful categories like stuff we're proud of, stuff we're working on, and stuff that's probably mistakes but we did it anyway. But the most significant part of the transmission was a brief message that would forever change galactic civilization. "Can't wait to meet you in person. We're already working on faster spaceships." Meanwhile, on Kepler 442b, the Verdanian Botanical Collective was still waiting patiently for someone to respond to their inquiry about optimal growing conditions for interdimensional chrysanthemums, blissfully unaware that they had accidentally triggered the first truly honest interstellar cultural exchange in galactic history. The Verdanians, being essentially sentient moss, were perfectly content to wait several centuries for a reply and spent their time composing haikus about moisture levels and discussing the philosophical implications of photosynthesis. They had no idea that their intended message had instead connected two species who were about to revolutionize the concept of galactic civilization. As news of the human-Kleptonian exchange spread through galactic communication networks, other species began to take notice. The crystalline entities of Vega 7 expressed interest in human music, particularly something called rock and roll, which seemed to involve sound frequencies that could actually shatter crystal formations. They found this fascinating rather than threatening. The hive mind of Sector 12 requested copies of human literature, especially stories about individual consciousness and personal identity, concepts they found both bizarre and intriguing. Even the notoriously reclusive probability monks of the Quantum Monastery sent a message expressing curiosity about human chaos theory and wondering if perhaps their centuries of trying to predict and control random events had been missing the point entirely. But the most unexpected response came from the galactic bureaucracy itself. The vast, ancient institution that had maintained order and stability across thousands of worlds for millions of years through the simple expedient of making everything take forever to process and requiring 17 different forms for any kind of change. The chief administrator of galactic affairs, Zenthrillion the impossibly patient, had held his position for 3,000 years, primarily because nothing had ever happened quickly enough to require urgent attention. Galactic civilization moved at the speed of geological processes, and everyone was perfectly content with that pace. Until now, the human transmissions had completely bypassed normal galactic communication protocols. Instead of filing proper requests for contact through the appropriate diplomatic channels and waiting the standard 75 years for approval, they had simply started talking to whoever would listen and shared everything they had with the enthusiasm of children showing off a new toy. By bureaucratic standards, this was catastrophic. By practical standards, it was the most efficient first contact in galactic history. "Sir," reported Administrative Assistant Glorblex, the perpetually worried, "we're receiving applications for cultural exchange programs from over 40,000 species. They all want to try the human approach to civilization development." Zenthrillion felt something he had never experienced in 3 millennia of administrative service: the need to make a decision quickly. And what exactly is the human approach? According to our analysis, sir, it appears to be try everything, expect mistakes, learn from failures, and never ever take no for an answer unless it comes with a better alternative. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the Chief Administrator of Galactic Affairs made an executive decision in less than 6 months. "Approved," he said, "all of it. Let's see what happens when we stop trying to prevent change and start trying to adapt to it." The policy change that followed was later known as the Great Galactic Experimental Period, during which previously stable civilizations began deliberately introducing controlled chaos into their societies, just to see what would happen. The results were mixed. The Harmony Collective of Sirius B discovered that a little bit of disagreement actually improved their music composition by approximately 47%. The Perfect Order Society of Rigel attempted to introduce creative disorder and accidentally invented abstract art, which they found both disturbing and oddly compelling. Several civilizations had nervous breakdowns and requested immediate reassignment to quieter galaxy clusters, but an equal number reported that introducing human-style productive chaos had solved problems they hadn't even realized they had. Back on Earth, humanity was blissfully unaware that they had accidentally revolutionized galactic civilization. They were too busy preparing for what they were calling the most epic first contact party in universal history. The response from Earth wasn't coming from any government agency or official diplomatic body. Instead, it was being coordinated by a loose alliance of space enthusiasts, scientists, artists, musicians, chefs, gamers, and random internet users who had declared themselves the official, unofficial Earth Welcome Committee and were planning to give their new alien friends the most comprehensive introduction to human culture ever attempted. The plan, such as it was, involved launching a series of cultural exchange modules containing everything from classical music to pizza recipes, to video games, to samples of every type of coffee bean grown on Earth. They had also included what they called the Complete Human Survival Guide, which was essentially instructions for how to be human. Step 1, try stuff. Step 2, if it doesn't work, try something else. Step 3, if it does work, try to figure out why, then try to make it work better. Step 4, repeat until you either succeed magnificently or fail so spectacularly that it becomes a good story. The Kleponians received this package with the kind of academic excitement usually reserved for discovering new fundamental laws of physics. Here was a species that had actually systematized the process of productive failure and turned it into a philosophy of continuous improvement. But the most remarkable aspect of the entire exchange was what happened next. Nothing went according to anyone's plan, and everyone was delighted about it. The cultural exchange modules were launched on schedule, but due to a navigation error, a very human mistake, they ended up arriving at 17 different star systems simultaneously, triggering the largest spontaneous first contact event in galactic history. The Kleponians, who had been expecting a careful, controlled introduction to human culture, instead found themselves dealing with confused reports from dozens of other species who had all received mysterious packages containing something called pizza and instructions for playing games that involved jumping on mushrooms and collecting gold coins. The humans, meanwhile, discovered that their attempt to contact one species had somehow resulted in messages from 47 different civilizations, each wanting to know more about this fascinating chaos-based approach to existence. By any traditional diplomatic standards, the entire situation should have been a disaster. Multiple first contacts happening simultaneously without proper protocols, cultural exchanges occurring without official oversight, and communication networks completely overwhelmed by enthusiastic amateurs trying to translate between species that had never heard of each other. Instead, it was the most successful interstellar cultural exchange in recorded history. The reason was simple. Humans had accidentally applied their fundamental approach to the problem. Instead of trying to prevent mistakes, they had built systems that could adapt to whatever happened. Instead of having one perfect plan, they had dozens of imperfect plans that could be modified on the fly. When the navigation error scattered their cultural packages across multiple star systems, they didn't panic and try to retrieve them. They celebrated the fact that they were now in contact with more alien species and immediately started preparing additional packages customized for their new friends. When the communication networks became overloaded, they didn't try to limit the traffic. They applied their experience with managing internet congestion and developed new protocols that could handle the increased load while actually improving the quality of the connections. When the galactic bureaucracy tried to impose proper diplomatic procedures on the chaos, the humans cheerfully agreed to fill out all the required forms while continuing to do exactly what they had been doing all along, because they had centuries of experience with bureaucracy and knew that the secret was to comply with the letter of the law while completely ignoring its spirit. The final message of the Great Cultural Exchange came not from any official source, but from Blix Flindermort, the Kleptonian administrative assistant whose cosmic dyslexia had started the entire chain of events. His message was brief, simple, and transmitted on all available frequencies to every species that had participated in the exchange. I made a mistake. It was the best mistake in galactic history. Sometimes the wrong answer is exactly the right answer, just not to the question you thought you were asking. The response from Earth was equally brief and somehow perfectly appropriate. Welcome to being human. Population, everyone who's willing to try.